Hi, I'm Greg Hunter. Welcome to USAWatchdog.com. Every 3 or 4 weeks, I start getting emails from people who start jonesing for Dr. Jim Willie. And, it's time to have him back on. We have a fast-moving situation in the global financial picture, and Ukraine has just thrown gasoline on the fire. Dr. Jim Willie, thank you for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com.
Always a pleasure to be back, Greg. It's been a while, and I enjoy it. Go ahead. This is nasty stuff happening in a totally desperate situation.
I want to just continue your introduction. Of course, you are the editor of the Hat Trick Letter. It's a paid-for newsletter, a good one at that. And it can be found, and you can be found on goldenjackass.com. Just want to get that out of the way. Of course, you are and I want people to know this because I call you Dr. Willie, and I don't do that out of just calling you Dr. Willie like, Doc Holliday or something. Although you are, an outlaw. But anyway, I say that in a good way. But, you have a PhD, an earned PhD from Carnegie Mellon in statistics. So, yes, Dr. Jim Willie is joining us today. Love your newsletter. Let's start with the Ukraine and the desperation you were talking about. Just off camera, I was saying, it just looks like to me that they didn't really think out this plan. And what do you say about this whole Ukrainian, crisis that's been manufactured?
Well, let me have a preface that Alan Greenspan did not have a PhD. His was an honorary doctorate. Let's just put that out on the table. What we've got with Ukraine, I believe, is an absolutely desperate situation where the U.S. government realizes we have to stop Ukraine from becoming a central transit point for energy pipelines in the fast-developing Eurasian trade zone. They need to stop the Eurasian trade zone because the United States and England are largely going to be excluded. Okay. Now, if you look at reality behind the curtains and what's going on, I believe this is the third attack against Russian Gazprom, the giant monopoly that Russia controls for natural gas. The first attack was veiled, and it was Cyprus. Okay, Gazprom Bank was gigantic in Cyprus. There were a couple of other large banks, Sberbank, but Russia had been using Cyprus as their clearinghouse window for all bank transactions to the West, and furthermore, that includes the central bank. And furthermore, Russia was using Cyprus as a clearinghouse for buying gold bullion. So the U.S. and Europe tried to do they called it a bank confiscation. No, it was an assault against Russian Gazprom. The second attack against Russian Gazprom was Syria. And we've talked about this before. The Iran pipelines were to be connected with the Syrian ports. And Russian Gazprom was going to have commitments of all that gas. They're going to get the commitments. It's just a matter of time. There's some delays. There's a war in the way. Okay, that's what the U.S. does. There's a war in the way. All right, that gas will be committed to Western Europe. It's going to be Iranian gas line. And we're not going to see OPEC and Saudi prominent anymore. So here we are, the third attack against Russian Gazprom. The U.S. and Europe actually believes that if they control the gas pipeline valves on the western corner that feed Romania, Poland, and Hungary, they actually believe if they control the valves, they can control the flow. What if the flow is cut off? I mean, you asked me before, why do they do things that appear to be so stupid? And I asked you, have you ever known someone truly desperate who had no options and did stupid things? That's what we're seeing now, Greg.
Well, you wrote a piece calling, your most recent piece that just came out last week, that you wrote a piece that talked about the dollar Waterloo. That this is it. And, I see these, the U.S. is going to exclude Russia. They're a creditor. Russia is one of our creditors, as is China. They're going to exclude them from the G8. One of your points is, forget the G8. It's the G20 now. Forget the G8. It's over. So tell me about the dollar Waterloo. What's going to happen to the U.S. dollar?
Wow, there are just so many sides closing in on the United States that it's almost becoming a tragic comedy that these Nazis in power in Washington and Wall Street are being revealed as Nazis with lots of different Nazi connections and loans to the Nazis in Germany, which were pure sedition, betrayal, treason. These guys are running out of options. Now, you've got the United States. When I heard that Kerry made a threat to exclude Russia and isolate them, I thought, yeah, right. That's going to backfire, and the U.S. will be isolated. All right, so they want to disinvite. The G7 became G8 when they included Russia. All right, that was a nice gesture. Well, they're a major oil, gas, and metal mineral producer, supplier to Europe and the world. Okay, they deserve to be in there. Maybe they're not a gigantic creditor. They only have something like 160 or 170 billion dollars in treasury bonds. But you know, that's not the point. If the U.S. tries to exclude them from the G8, most likely the G7 will continue not to meet. They cancel their meetings as often as they have them. The G20, I made this forecast back 3 years ago. I said, watch the G8 become irrelevant and the G20 take over and China run it as opposed to the U.S. and Britain. That has now happened in the last year or 18 months. We just had a G20 meeting in Australia. I believe it was Australia, Sydney. This was just in the last week. And China just railed on the United States. They said, you're living off fumes. You're living off the printing press with no justifiable income. Your economy is a fake. Gosh, I mean, this is getting hostile, and this was in a G20 meeting. I don't give a rat's ass about the G8. Who cares about the G8? What's going to happen next? And this came straight from the voice. He said, because we were teasing him, saying, well, here's what I think might happen. I said, I believe that Russia is going to cut off the gas pipeline supply to Ukraine and Western Europe. By the way, 25% of all Western Europe gas supply is from Ukraine pipelines and Russia, obviously. All right, well, now Ukraine is being told you got a $2 billion bill, and if you're going to play ball with the U.S. and European clown show run by the bankers, we're going to have to ask for that $2 billion back. No, here's what the voice said. We teased him with a lot of potentials like cutoffs, and he said, well, cutoffs are obvious. But what's likely to come very soon is Russia is going to demand either rubles or gold bullion for their crude oil and their natural gas, their energy shipments, oil and gas. Now, if Russia demands rubles, I guarantee you they're going to convert the rubles as much as they can directly to gold bullion. And they're also going to sabotage the intervention by London and Wall Street against the Russian ruble. If they demand ruble payment, it immediately puts the kibosh and sabotages all Wall Street and London intervention games where they're trying to punish Russia by seeing their currency decline. We're not in the driver's seat being a big debtor. We're not in the driver's seat being a big importer of energy. We're not in the driver's seat on anything except terrorism. Notice that the snipers on the roof in Kiev, they've been exposed as being CIA plants and agents. Serbia is the rat's nest of the CIA Al-Qaeda network. And if Americans can't wake up to the fact that Al-Qaeda is a U.S. Langley asset, they're freaking morons.
Let me go back to the dollar, though. You painted a pretty grim picture about American power, and that they're going to be excluded, and that that we're really not in the driver's seat because we're a big importer of energy, a big importer, a big importer of capital. I mean, we have a lot of debt. So what happens to the U.S. dollar? What is the timeline for the U.S. dollar for things happening to it?
Well, I think that there are several different pieces that come to play regarding the dollar. If Russia demands gold or ruble, let's just say either one, if they start making specific demands for payment on oil, My guess is the Saudis are going to do the same. The Saudis are going to say, well, you know, if Russia is going to create this standard, we want to follow our partner in huge exporting. We don't want to go against the new trend. This is the new formula. Watch Saudi. They're not strong anymore. The Saudis are really ticked off. They're angry at the United States. And notice that Qatar just expelled diplomats from the U.S. Embassy. Got news for you. It's a huge naval base for the U.S. Navy. Things are happening quickly. Notice that Qatar expelled diplomats the same week that we're having all the Ukraine problems. So did Russia make a phone call? All right, there's something else. This is a very difficult answer to make succinctly. But there was a leak of a London document for the UK government. The leak came out yesterday and said they will not support the sanctions led by the United States against Russia. They will not join. Okay, once again, Britain backed off the U.S. support in Syria. Now Britain's going to back off the NATO support in Ukraine. I'm expecting NATO to disintegrate from their support, but it's going to take a while to happen. All right, you ask, how is this going to happen? If the Russians break rank and say, we don't want dollar payment for our oil, we want gold or ruble, it's going to start a trend. Then China is going to say, we insist on paying for whatever crude oil, including Saudi, in yuan currency. And what you're going to get is a two-sided squeeze that's going to kill the petrodollar. So the more we pressure Russia, the more China is going to respond with Russia, and the more pressure will be on Saudi to do something to curry favor with China and Russia. Saudi is on the outs right now. So I'm expecting that the response to U.S. pressure will be steps that kill the petrodollar and force banking systems around the world to start divesting of treasury bonds, because they won't need them.
Well, what's the timeline on that? Because that's the same kind of scenario that John Williams was talking about, the beginnings of hyperinflation in 2014 with people exiting dollar assets, bonds, dollars. Bye-bye. We don't need them. See ya. We're selling them. Give us our cash. We're liquefying. Well, what's the timeline on that? Is that 2014, sometime in the next few months, in the next year? What is your timeline for this big dollar stampede out of the dollar and out of treasuries?
Well, let me throw it back on you. Timing is very difficult. Let me throw it back on you. You think Putin is going to hesitate a long time?
No.
I don't either. And the time between events, we've talked about this a few different times. It's a metric used in reliability analysis and manufacturing quality control. The time between events is really closing. So kind of like an earthquake, the tectonic reverberations, the events are getting closer and closer. And you can say it with the human mother and the birth process. We're getting closer and closer, these dilations. Okay, something's going to happen. It's going to happen soon. I do not think Putin is going to say, well, let's just see what happens. Let's give this a couple months and, let's have some vodka and think about that. No, he's calling the Americans mutants. And, that's an entire story in itself. Russia is really angry. The Saudis threatened the Sochi Winter Olympics. I was hoping that we'd have no event, and we didn't. But the U.S. and the Europeans took advantage of the Olympics and developed the problems.
That's right. There was no accident. That's right.
No accident. They took advantage of a kind of an open door. Hey, Putin's not going to do anything during the Olympics. So now the Olympics are over, and as soon as it was over, their parliament made a unanimous approval for military action. There's some arguments that maybe Russia and Putin want to split Ukraine in half, the eastern half being Russian-speaking. I think it's kind of possible.
Oh.
The biggest asset Russia has in Ukraine is the Crimean naval base.
Yeah, okay.
It is their only warm water port in the world.
Home of the Black Sea Fleet. They're going to give that up. They wouldn't give up Tardis. They're not going to give that up.
They're not going to give it up. I mean, would the United States give up the Chesapeake?
No.
Okay, no.
This is why I say this plan was so stupidly thought out. I mean, what did they think he was going to do if they're going to take away the Black Sea naval base? Excuse me, invade. I'm not even I'm not even an expert. I have no contacts like you do. Just as a regular guy reading the paper and looking at the news, I'd say he's going to invade. I mean, couldn't they know that?
There might be a much bigger, more sinister plan that I really don't want to get into much in depth, but I'm going to mention. It could be that the whole point here is to provoke Putin and Russia into making a first strike. And if they make a large, let's just say large, I don't like using the N-word. If they make a large strike, then the U.S. is going to come back 20 times larger and destroy the Russian nation. That could be what these desperate Nazis are trying to do. I don't want to get into that, though. I really don't want to get into that. I think that there are two weak links here that are kind of strange. There's obviously the weak link for, demanding non-dollars for Russian oil, and the Chinese doing the opposite, demanding that they're going to use their own currency, the yuan, to pay for oil. Those two, they're the axis for the Eurasian trade zone. They're the axis for it. The United States wants to stop it. See, the United States did something really stupid. They tried to exclude China from the Trans-Pacific Partnership and say to Korea and Japan, and all the other Indonesian, let's make us really work with the U.S. and Canada, and we don't really need China. Are you kidding me? Now what they're trying to do is exclude Russia from the G8. There's so many little queer parallels. I think it was a very big mistake to invite Ukraine into the NATO. It's like, can you imagine the Russians saying, let's invite Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic into the Soviet Union?
Yeah, the Soviet Federation, yeah.
Yeah. Well, okay.
Yeah, the Russian Federation.
I'm talking in the past.
Yeah.
So, here are the two weak links that I see as kind of unusual. And, I like to think of the unusual because often they come to pass, and most people don't have this on the radar. Could it be that Turkey is the weakest link in NATO? Turkey?
Yes, Turkey
breaks.
with their currency problems, yes. Yes, with their government problems, yes.
They got a lot of different problems, and they got some big fraud cases that have nothing to do with the United States. They've got some cases that have to do with helping out Iran with some of their gold settlement and what I call the Iran workarounds, which are an enormous development in the last year and a half. The Iran workaround is the prototype for gold trade settlement. But I believe Turkey might break ranks from NATO. And if they get angry enough, they might say something like, and you can't use our Incirlik Air Force Base for your Afghan heroin anymore. The U.S. uses Turkish Air Force Base at Incirlik as a primary movement, transition, distribution point for Afghan heroin. Okay, here's another weak link that's, way off the radar. But the boys tipped me off a couple weeks ago. We were wondering, is this the time that Germany could break away? And the whole German story is enormous. Germany is going to say, we've had enough of London and Washington. We've had enough.
Yeah, we're going to start their gold.
Well, they lost their gold. We stole that. You call it rehypothecation all you want. And even London and France said, look, we could start a war in Mali and pay you back. I mean, that's the message. But Germany, with their mad cow Merkel, just might wake up. The bankers with Deutsche Bank, they're in big trouble. With Deutsche Bank about to be split up, the Germans might decide, Now is the time. These Americans and British, they're way out of control. We want an alliance with Ukraine and Russia. We don't want to cause problems. And besides, we got all this Russian liquefied natural gas coming in on the Nord Stream and the North Sea undersea LNG pipelines. Germany and Russia are already commercial allies. But I'm leading to a point here. Here's the outlier, the little wild card. It could be Finland that says we're not going to have the Euro monetary union anymore. We're not going to use the Euro currency. Finland.
Yeah, we're going to use the ruble.
It could very well be, because I don't think it would be a shock in the next year to see the Russians come out and say, we got over 20,000 tons of gold, and we're going to back our ruble with gold and screw the dollar. I've been told they got over 20,000 tons of gold. I've got a source that has seen their tunnels and been in them under the Kremlin. He's also assured me that the Chinese have over 15,000 tons. Now you got these rumors that the Chinese are about to announce a 3,000-ton gold reserve. Well, what if they say it's 9 or 8, like Fort Knox? And then they allow rumors to float around that it's more like 15 or 17,000 tons. Now, the Russians and Chinese, in the next year or 18 months, I believe, are going to let it be known that together they own close to 40,000 tons of gold. And they're going to start backing a real currency and do a real global reset, a real return to the gold standard, and screw the dollar with all its toxic sovereign bonds and its printing presses and exchange stabilization funds and its interest rate derivatives and all the different terrorism that's behind it. I made a joke when I started the newsletter, Greg, back in 2004. I said one of the principal, foundations of the dollar, it's not gold, it's the military. We're seeing it now.
Let's get back to what it looks like on Main Street this year, next year. What are Americans going to feel who are just taking the blue pill? I mean, friends of mine just think I am crazy. They didn't want to read my site. It's too painful. A friend of mine last night said, things are getting better. I just went, oh, God, yeah, okay, whatever. But, what does America look like when this, I believe, I'm in your camp, my friend. What does America look like when this dollar quits getting used and people shun it, and we have problems in Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia starts taking payment in yuan? Europe starts paying Russia in ruble or gold. What does the dollar look like? What's the backflow on the U.S.? What does that look like?
I think it's going to be accelerated, hyper acceleration in QE bond monetization. Because if nations start dumping their treasury bonds in order to buy Russian oil, they're going to have to trade their treasury bonds for gold or for rubles. They're going to have to do whatever is necessary to obtain their crude oil. And Russia is a bigger supplier than the Saudis.
Yes.
And they've got tremendous reserve capacity, whereas the Saudis have been lying about their reserve capacity. They don't have much in the way of excess at all. So all these different nations are going to dump the treasury bond. And I believe the result will be that Janet Yellen's going to have maybe an accident in her pants or dress every single day and ramp up the QE volume, while at the same time they ramp up into overdrive the interest rate derivative. So the response to the petrodollar demise and the Russian-Chinese attack against the dollar and treasury bond, the treasury bond, just the trading vehicle, the reserve item, asset sitting in the banks that earn an interest. That no longer earn an interest. All these nations are going to be dumping. So the U.S. is going to have to use the Fed to compensate. And as the pressure becomes acute, and as they break the interest rate derivative machinery, and as they lose the support of the nation and the world and the banking community for hyperinflation that's not tapering but is doing the opposite, we will see the launch of the shit dollar. or if you don't want to edit it out, I'll call it the shice dollar. The U.S. is going to have to split and make its own dollar because they are ruining the global dollar. Now they need to make, Greg, a domestic dollar so they can wreck it, just like Venezuela. Your model for what's coming to the United States is Venezuela. They had two different devaluations totaling about 73%. It happened bang, bang, 4 or 5 months apart, which resulted in 100% price inflation and tremendous shortages because the suppliers would prefer to sell to foreign entities. So
you're saying 100% price inflation in America. Gas, instead of being $3.50 or whatever, it'd be $8, $9, $10 a gallon.
Well, you can't just multiply everything by 2. What you're going to get is that imports are going to double in price after the shocks. Okay, what do we import? We import 2/3 of our oil. We import less of our natural gas because we've done this fracking nonsense that has destroyed and contaminated the water table. Now they're doing fracking in Ukraine. I didn't mention one of the key elements of Ukraine. Ukraine is a giant breadbasket. It's a wheat field. I mean, Stalin killed 6 million Ukrainians to nationalize the agricultural fields.
Yep.
And now the United States and Europe have installed Monsanto to be in charge of the Ukrainian wheat fields. This is an agribusiness coup, just as much as an attempt to halt Gazprom. The food supply for Europe is now going to be genetically modified. And I don't want to get into all the genetic modification stuff, but it ain't good, and it's tied in with viruses.
And back in with to the U.S., well, we're going to have people who are going to go crazy. I mean, their $1,500 a month Social Security check is going to be in today's money is going to be like having $300 or something like that. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, well, for anything the United States makes locally, like razor blades or soap, or even maybe certain components for computers or whatever like that, that's going to stay stable in price. Whatever they import is going to double in price. And what I usually do is say, well, take the import factor and divide it by 2, and that's going to be your shock price inflation effect. So if you get 100% increase in import prices due to the currency effect, which I think John Williams is correct about this time, the last 3 or 4 years, he's not been correct. He's thought it would be an inflation effect due to monetary factors, and I've been saying for 4 years, no, you get no inflation until it becomes a currency factor. Now it's becoming a currency factor. So you're going to see price inflation hit the United States with a vengeance.
So people should go out right now and just, everything's on sale. I've been telling people everything's on sale. Just buy, what do you need? Buy everything. Buy everything you need. I mean, if you can afford gold and silver, great. But if you can't, just buy paper towels, toilet paper, soap, food, canned food, water. Get tires for your car. I've been telling people just simple stuff. Is that crazy or is that smart?
Well, that's smart, but unfortunately it means that you're a terrorist.
Yeah, to warn people, to cushion this big inflation is what I'm trying to tell people about, to cushion themselves. They'll do better.
Sooner or later, people are going to wake up and realize that our government is the terrorist. That they declared all the Occupy Wall Street people as terrorists. Well, that's the terrorist calling people who want free banking, policy. I don't mean free, I mean legitimate banking. They're not the terrorists.
Free market.
Free market, yeah. Now you've got a Russian refinery that was attacked and a Chinese train station that was attacked. In time, we will find the traces back to the Serbians that are run by Langley. This is so deep and so ugly that I get very bothered by it. But I think we're going to face some resolutions soon. The Americans are not going to wake up until their
resolution. What do you mean by that?
The dollar gets rejected. If the dollar gets rejected, the United States has to make its own dollar.
And that's when the inflation. That's where the inflation takes off.
The dollar's going to be rejected as long as Washington controls it. When Washington stops controlling it, the international dollar will be born, and it will be the same as before. All the dollars sitting in banks, Singapore, Hong Kong, Switzerland, Panama, all those dollars will be fine. They'll be fine. But right now there's a threat. Everybody is saying, get your hands off the dollar. You're wrecking the dollar at the Fed. You've got deficits in the United States. You're funding aggressive wars. You've got $18 trillion zero interest rate loans given to bankers around the world. You've got QE wrecking the dollar. Get your hands off the dollar. Make your own domestic dollar, then wreck it, just like in Venezuela. Now, the U.S. is not going to wake up until the dollar is rejected under U.S. control, and the U.S. must make its own dollar, and then the United States must come to grips with being a third world nation in its finances, and its banking policy, and its legal system, and its war aggression, and its infrastructure decay, and its voter rigging corruption. The United States is a third world nation. We need to wake up to that and do something about it. But it's not going to be fixed until these guys are cleaned out. And they won't be cleaned out until they steal everything in sight and confiscate your bank account. So the people out there wondering what can they do? Well, you have a J.P. Morgan stock or bank account, Bank of America account, Wells Fargo account, Citibank account. I got a brother who I consider to be dumb as hell. He's got a Citibank account. I said, what'd you do that for? Well, it's convenient. It's convenient for them to steal it. I understand. Yes, it's very convenient. Now, we haven't had any...
So get out of the big banks. Local banks. Should people have some cash at home? I mean, sounds to me like this is going to unwind sooner than later. That Putin is not going to wait, to your point. That this is going to unwind and the issues are going to be pushed forward in a quick speed. So should you have cash at home? Should you get out of the big banks and bank at little, small, local banks? What should you do?
Well, you can have some cash at home to handle your transactions and your utility bills and your rent, but I think it might make a whole lot more sense to have silver ounce coins and gold ounce coins, because when there's a lot of doubt, I just had this discussion with a couple of clients. They said, what's going to happen with our trade suppliers? And I said, if we've got a shice dollar that's being devaluated slowly, I don't know if there are going to be a lot of suppliers who are going to be eager to take it, because in 2 months it might be devaluated again.
Yeah.
And that is precisely what's going on in Venezuela. And I said, on the other side, I don't think many countries are going to be willing to have U.S. investments with the new dollar, because they don't want. Okay, there's like a period. It's the lubrication. It's the overnight loans. It's the credit. It's the letters of credit. It's the 30-day credit. It's the commercial paper that often had backing by mortgage bonds, but when the subprime hit, a lot of disruptions took place. The grease to the system is about to go away. The U.S. dollar, if a new one is coming about, the suppliers and all the trade partners and the commercial partners that do business with big U.S. companies, take a list of 50 big U.S. companies. They might have trouble with their supply chain because the suppliers might say, we don't trust this new dollar. We're not going to take the 30-day risk. We can't hedge the 30-day risk. There might not be a shice dollar versus U.S. international dollar. I shouldn't call it U.S. A shice dollar versus the international dollar futures contract to hedge against for 30-day risk. They might lose 4% in that 30 days because this is going to be a rapidly devaluating U.S. new shice dollar. I'm saying roughly 80% in 3 years.
Oh, my God.
80% decline in 3 years, which means 300% price inflation, roughly.
Jim Willie, I think you've painted a picture of a pretty dark picture that people need to know about. It's not doom porn. It's just plain old statistics, which you're an expert at. And I really appreciate you coming on USA Watchdog and drawing a sharp focus on what's going on in the world. Thank you, sir. Oh, and by the way, again, you are the editor of the Hat Trick letter, which can be found on goldenjackass.com. It is a paid-for letter. I have subscribed in the past. I don't now. I think you give me a complimentary copy of it, but it is a good letter, and people should go to goldenjackass.com and look for the Hat Trick letter. Thank you very much, Dr. Jim Willie.
As a final point, can I make a final point?
Have at it.
Russia is supplier of 44% of the world's palladium supply. Do you think they're going to cut off the West on their palladium? You can't threaten a major supplier. Period. All right. Pleasure being on, Greg.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jim Willie, goldenjackass.com, the editor of the Hat Trick letter. Thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.